Hi guys, in this video we are talking about fitting F chassis brakes onto an E39. So 340mm F chassis M Sport setup, 370mm F chassis M Sport setup, 340mm disc F30, 370mm disc F30, 348mm disc E90 335i 335D. But it's very similar to the 340mm disc, so we'll discuss whether you can use this disc as well. And you've got an E39 hub here. So let's get started. So the first point to talk about is F chassis calipers, and most other BMWs, I'd say probably 95% of all other BMWs, use symmetrical calipers. So there's a symmetry between the left hand side and the right hand side, which basically means the distance between the center of the hub and the attachment point on the caliper is the same between the left attachment point and the right, or the upper and the lower. On the E39, that's not the case. That attachment point is closer to the center than that attachment point. So what that means is, if we were to bolt that caliper onto those attachment points, if they'd fit in the first place, which they don't, then the caliper wouldn't be sitting nice and straight over the disc. It'll be offset like that. So the second point that I want to talk to you about is these bolt holes. So the spacing between the bolt holes on the F chassis is about 122mm center to center, and on the E39 is about 124mm. So there's about 2mm difference, E39 being 2mm further apart. Now, to attach the caliper to the hub, what you could do is you could use the eccentric caliper bushings and downsize from an M12 bolt to an M10 bolt, but this being a critical joint on the front axle of the car with the brake calipers, I don't recommend using an M10 bolt. So I would recommend the following. Keep the caliper bushings as they are with the M12 bolts, but elongate this hole here, which is further away from the center of the hub, in such way that it will allow you to bolt the caliper on, and it will also allow you to rotate the caliper ever so slightly so that it sits nice and straight over the disc. So if we look at the attachment points, this here is the left hand side hub that we have off of an E39. So my recommendation would be to elongate this hole. If you're looking at it this way, in the direction of 7 o'clock, so that way. I've already had a go at these attachment points with a drill bit, so I just used a 12mm drill bit. I've put it in and I've just allowed the drill to rotate and applied some force in this direction and elongated it ever so slightly. There's still a little bit to go, so I would suggest getting about 3mm in that direction there, going about 3mm that way. So attaching the disc onto the hub is very straightforward. Disc literally just goes straight on. F30 discs and E90 discs have perfect offset for the E39. The center spigot diameter is exactly the same. The bolt hole is exactly the same to hold the disc down. So it's nice and easy, and the offset is perfect. You can literally bolt the disc down and it fits perfectly. You do not need to modify the backing plate, the dust shield. And this is what it looks like attached. And the same goes for the 370mm discs and for the 348mm discs of the E90. And now on to attaching the caliper to the hub. So this is the hole that's been elongated. Still haven't finished completely, but we're nearly there. So the bolt almost goes in easily. This one is attached nice and securely. You will need 10mm worth of spacing between the caliper and the hub. So I use these washers here just to show it as an illustration. 10mm will allow you to get the caliper centered right across the disc here, so that center line is matching the center line of the disc here. And you will need 10mm longer bolts, so you will need M12 by 50mm bolts. Now let's have a look at what it looks like fastened down. And that's what it looks like. So as you can see here, once I have finished elongating that hole in this direction, the caliper should sit a bit better across the disc. So at the moment, it's still a little bit tilted in that direction. So see the gap here versus the gap on this side, much tighter, but it's almost there. So let's have a look at how the pads fit. It's not a perfect fit for the pads. So the right hand side edge fits fairly well. It's almost flush with the edge of the disc, where the left hand side is still slightly proud. You will not get rid of that completely, regardless of how much you elongate the bolt holes, because that's quite a bit of material. So ideally use brand new discs, and this is how the pad will sit. So it's sitting ever so slightly more proud. But once the hole is elongated enough, this side will come down a little bit, and that's going to be a little bit more level. But even as it is at the moment, if you're able to fasten it down without any tension on the bolts and without cross-threading the bolts into the caliper inserts, this will suffice and it will work just fine. You could also use the E90 disc, 348mm, but the issue is the contact patch of the pad. The height of the contact patch is actually narrower than the height of the pad. So the pad will overlap into this bit here, which isn't really the braking face, the contact face, and it will overlap out of the edge, and it's going to be quite close in this section here where the caliper is closer to the edge of the disc. So I don't recommend using them. You can if you wanted to, they will still fit, but I would suggest using f30 discs and f30 calipers. And it's going to look exactly like this with the 370mm disc. And let me show you. And there you go, 370mm setup. So very much the same fit as it is with the 340. The pads are slightly proud by a few millimeters, more so on this side of the caliper than on this side. So to summarize, what you need is elongate the bolt holes to be able to bolt the caliper down and to rotate it ever so slightly to get it nice and level with the disc, and space the caliper by 10mm and get 10mm longer bolts. So M12 by 50 is what you need to be able to bolt this down properly. And then you'll probably need spacers as well, depending on your wheels, but that's the way to do it. So I hope this answers some of your questions regarding E39 brake setups. So you can make the f3x brakes fit onto them, but there are a few things to consider. So it's entirely down to you whether you want to do this upgrade or not, but this is the way I would recommend doing it if it's something that you wanted to do. So as far as E39s are concerned, I think the M5 shares common hubs with the rest of the cars, other than the pins on the rotors, on the discs. So if it is an E39 M5 you're trying to do this upgrade on, I would just punch the pins out which are on the hub, and you should still be able to do it this way. And I think the E53 X5 is also the same. Don't hold me to it. I'm not sure about disc offsets or anything like that. So if it is the same, and you know for a fact that it shares common front end with an E39, then this should also apply to the X5. So hope this answers some of your questions. If you have any more, please give me a shout, let me know, and hopefully see you again soon. All the best.